The last bit of work we need to do is to pass what we've typed in the edit text to the child activity. Open this exercise that's titled Passing Data Between Activities and follow along. The first thing we'll need to do inside the main activity is to store the contents of the edit text into a string. I'll do that here inside the button click listener so that it happens when I click the button. And I'll store it in a string called text entered. Now to send that string to the child activity, let's check out the documentation of the intents to find out what we could use. If you open the intent documentation in the Android developers website, you'll find this method putExtra. What it does is it stuffs this data that we want to pass into this envelope, or the intent rather. The intent extras store data as key value pairs. You can store primitives like characters or numeric types, strings, or even complex objects, but we'll talk more about those later in this course. In our case, the data we want to send to the child activity is a string. But we need to come up with a key or a name to be able to retrieve that string on the other side. This is what the first parameter in putExtra is. The second parameter is what data you want to pass through. For the key or the name, you could come up with your own string, or you could use one of the constant strings defined in the intent class. In our case here, I'll use the string that's defined as extra text inside the intent class. This makes our code a lot cleaner and easier to understand. And then I'll pass in the text entered string I just created. And just like before, we start the activity with that intent. Now, if we try to run the app, it would start the new activity, but nothing gets updated. So let's fix that. In our child activity, after getting a reference to the text view, we need to get the intent that created this activity so that we could retrieve the data that was passed in it, pretty much like opening the envelope. If we go back to the documentation of intent, we'll see that the method getStringExtra would retrieve a string using the string name. This is what we need to extract the extras from the intent. However, we shouldn't immediately call it. Activities always have an intent which triggers to start that activity. Even in the earlier exercises, an intent was being created for a child activity, but it didn't have any data in it. So you shouldn't assume that every intent has extra data and always check if it does. Otherwise, your app might crash. To do that, we use the function hasExtra, which returns either true or false. And if it's true, we call the getStringExtra on the intent to retrieve that string, and then set that text view with that text.